Over the many years of teaching photography, one question that comes up all the time is, how do I find my style? And I've had many opportunities to think about this deeply and to really unravel the mysteries behind style and really get to know it and think about it. And I've come to somewhat of a solidified opinion on what I think style in photography and in art in general is. And so that's what I'm going to be covering in this video. If you want my opinion on what style is and how I understand it and how I explain it, then this video is for you. So right off the bat, I don't consider style to be this big, grand thing that people make it up to be. It's not like as if you don't have a style, that you're suddenly not a good photographer, right? Or that if you recognize style in other photographers' works, that they're suddenly a better photographer than you might be. I don't believe these things to be true at all. Rather, I see style as a multi-pronged expression of your journey. I think one person doesn't necessarily need to have one singular style. One person can have many different styles and many different interests and many different styles that represent and express that. Style is simply the expression of you as you are in this moment, with all of the baggage of the goals and the visions and the ambitions and the triumphs and the failures that come along with that. It's literally just an expression of you as you are right now. But of course, some images are better at expressing themselves than others. There is a art and a craft to expressing those images and to having a style that does that. When people identify photographers to have a style, what they're usually referring to is being able to pick up visual patterns that they can recognize in their work. And if you've watched any of my videos in the past, you probably know what I'm going to say next, that the photographer's work has a clarity to it. It has a understandability to it. There is a clear intention. It has definable visual patterns. It's these visual patterns that, when meshed together, form the genesis of what we call style. And you know the feeling when you just get an image, when you understand it, when an image just makes you stop and pay attention to it, when the image has a story to tell and you know exactly what it's saying by just looking at it. This is visual communication. But how do we get there? How do we make images that emote, that resonate, that speak, that have stories to tell? Well, it starts by changing the question. The question shouldn't be, how do I find my style? Again, style is not a destination. It's not something that can be found all at once. You don't suddenly, not have style and then wake up the next day and suddenly have it, right? Rather, the question should be, how do we build our style? That's the question we should be answering here. And the answer can be broken down into two parts: why we create the things that we create and how we create them. Let's start with the hard one, the why. Now, this is only hard because people make it hard, because this is like grand ivory tower idea that art needs to have some kind of profound meaning in order to exist. But it doesn't. Art doesn't need to be so grand. You don't need to be an art major in order to make photographs and call it art. The why of documenting history and documenting life is just as valid as the why of documenting your groceries, right? These two things can coexist with one another. Take your weight off your shoulders, right? Because this is the luxury of art. Art can be anything. Art is about the creation and the sharing and the meaning that gets made with the sharing from that. And the meaning doesn't necessarily need to lie with the creator all the time. The meaning can also lie with the viewer. But if you do have a why for your art, if you do have a meaning for why you create, that's great, because now you're cooking with fire. Now, for some examples, for me personally, I have many styles that revolve around this idea of contrast and contradiction. So the many styles that I have explores this idea, especially of contradiction, because I love to see and test what comes out of that and how it can benefit my life. And in terms of styles of what I explore very simple things or very maybe deeper philosophical things. It could be simple things such as like the ideas of light versus dark and how I can play with the contrast and the contradiction between those two things, or blue versus orange, or soft versus sharp. But it could also be exploring themes that are really deep and philosophical, like the nomadic introvert who loves to document really busy places full of people, even though it's completely against his nature. Another way that I do this is through my Instagram accounts. So my main account is really about the celebration and the showcase of people, places, and cultures. And it's really trying to inspire the viewer into going out and exploring those places and experiencing those things on their own. But the contrast, and if you've seen my previous videos on my second account before, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But in contrast, my second account is very much about the complete opposites of that. It's very much about exploring the mundane things of everyday life, the banal, the boring, the slice of life. And so my point here is that your why can be anything. It can be whatever you want it to be, and it can and will always change over a given enough period of time. So don't limit yourself. However, do try and be specific with your why, even if it is mundane, even if it is as mundane as like documenting your groceries every single day. Make sure you're specific about why you do the things that you do, because it will greatly help you in the next part, which is the how of why we create the things we create. So if the why of style is more aligned to the art of photography, then the how is more aligned to the craft of photography, the execution of photography. And this part takes time. You really have to be patient with yourself when it comes to building this portion of your style. So before we continue, if you haven't already watched my video on vision, then I highly recommend that you do that. It's a video about the real secret to getting good at photography, visual communication, and the rest of this video will make a lot more sense if you've watched that one previous. So let's dive in. How do we start to build our style? What are the mechanics behind that? Well, let's start with a metaphor. So think of it like a set of Lego blocks. If you only start with the base 2x4 blocks in one single color, you could make maybe a stack of like your blocks together. They might make a wall, right? Or maybe you could start to make a tower or something pretty primitive in that respect. But when you expand your options, when you start to acquire blocks of different sizes and different colors and different functions, that's when things start to get interesting. Building your style is a process of acquiring these different blocks, acquiring these different functions and shapes and colors and sizes and different techniques and methods. This is the art of visual communication, of visual language. When you acquire all these different blocks that do different things and understand their meaning, you can then start to have a bigger toolkit for you to be able to combine things together to start to express yourself. So to keep using the Lego metaphor, what happens is over time, when you start to get really good at building things, when you start to do them a lot, what you'll find is that you'll keep returning to similar ideas, similar methods, similar blocks time and time and time and time again. And you will start to use these blocks in more artful ways because you understand how they work and how the combinations of them work together as a set of things as well. Similarly, after a day's worth of shooting, when you're in Lightroom or whatever program you use to review your work, what you'll find over a long enough period of time, over enough images, is that you keep returning to the same techniques, to the same methods, to the same color patterns, to the same visual patterns of visual communication over and over and over and over again. The noticing of this is the genesis of you starting to create your style. Because again, that's what style is. Style is a representation, it is an expression of you as you are at that moment in time. It is the expression of how deep your lexicon of visual language really is. So whether you keep shooting things on the thirds, or you keep using the color blue, or you shoot frames all the time, or you constantly find yourself hunting for shadows, Whatever the case may be, whatever visual patterns you are leaning towards, play with it, shape it, mold it, test new things out, take things away. Eventually, over time, over a long enough body of work, these trends and these visual patterns will form on their own, and you can start to curate and understand them and really start to develop the building of your style. And this is especially difficult when you're a beginner. When you're in your first few years of photography, your style is everything. You are learning all the things and you're constantly changing up the things that you're using every single day. And that's how it's supposed to be, right? You're supposed to pick things and understand them and understand how they work in the context of each other so that you know which things you'd like and which things you don't. The same is true in life as it is in photography. You need to be a generalist first, understand the landscape of what you're trying to learn, and then find out what you like and then become a specialist in those things. But you have to be patient with yourself. It takes a very, very long time, especially if you're in your first few years of photography, because you just don't know what you don't know. And more importantly, you don't know what you like, right? You don't have that experience yet. So be patient with yourself. All right, so let's just rewind a little bit. Let's recap, let's summarize what we've talked about in this video so far. Now, the why of your photography will always dictate the how of your photography. So always start with the why, even if it's mundane. The more time you spend clarifying your why, the easier it will be to start to dissect the skills required in order to find out what you need to learn for your how. So if your why leads to you taking lots of portraits, for example, then the how of that isn't gonna look like a landscape photographer's how, right? You're not gonna be learning how to use long exposures or ND filters or focus stacking or any of those kind of techniques. Rather, what you're gonna be doing is you're going to be researching how to direct and pose models, how to pick the right gear to get the most out of faces and compression and those kind of things. You're going to be learning the nuances of how to get models to evoke certain looks and certain goals on a particular project. It's all of these little nuances that you are going to have to learn over a set period of time to understand what you need to get good at and understand what you like, and then start to surface those things as visual patterns in order to then start to refine your style over time. And the only way to improve your style is to keep finding these different patterns, to stick to the ones that you like the most, the ones that when combined together, multiple versions of them combined together, speak to your why the most, the ones that make it easy for you to stick with over a large body of work, because it is that body of work that when your style, your true style, starts to emerge. That is the point where your style becomes recognizable. And so that's why I don't see style as a grand thing to be so coveted, right? I see style as a journey. I see style as a reflection and expression of you as you are right now in this point in time, with all of the baggage of your goals and your aspirations and your achievements and your knowledge and your triumphs and your failures. Style is fluid. It always changes. Tomorrow it could look very different to what it looks like today. And that's kind of the point. I think that the goal of style is this never-ending pursuit of the chase of clarity. All right, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hit that like button and subscribe and all that good stuff. If you want to join the community, check me out on Instagram, on Patreon, and on Discord. That's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. But until then, go out there and make something that matters. Peace.